Hello, my name is Russell Myers, independent U.S. President for 2024. It is absolutely no secret that the majority of Americans support the idea of reducing defense spending. Previous polls have shown that over 70% of Americans favor reduced military spending. What is happening in Ukraine as I write this and record this should have absolutely no bearing on our defense spending. The U.S. is not in danger. We are not defending ourselves. What does have bearing in Ukraine would be the 12-plus biolabs in Ukraine, which were at least partially funded by, you guessed it, the Pentagon. However, that is another subject for another time. Here is what is relevant at this time and place. People who follow my Issues Unite channel have an idea of what I am going to detail here because I've talked about it several times there. When the government and the media talk about our defense budget, they are not actually talking about referring to our defense budget. They are referring exclusively to the Pentagon budget, which does not include everything related to our defense spending. Right now, the Pentagon budget exceeds $770 billion for a single year. For next year, Congress is considering adding another $30 billion, bringing the total to over $800 billion a year. However, to reference our actual defense spending, we would have to include a few other things. We would have to include the budgets for the CIA, FBI, NSA, Department of Homeland Security, VA, and upgrading nuclear weapons. Upgrading nuclear weapons, by the way, costs $100 billion a year. I'll get to that. All right. So none of that is included in the defense budget. If we add those budgets to that of the Pentagon, we find that our defense budget is greater than every other country on earth combined. The absolute total of all these systems would mean we spend close to or exceeding $2 trillion a year for defense spending. Every one of these budgets increases year upon year with no sign of slowing down. Part of the problem is that the U.S. has at least 800 foreign military bases, which we acknowledge. We have no idea how many covert military sites our country operates. In addition to this, we have at least 600 domestic military bases. So we have a total of roughly 1,400 military bases that we know of. That comes to a total of 28 military bases per U.S. state. In short, the land area, which comprises 28 military bases, may well exceed the land area of some states, while the personnel to man those bases can well exceed the population of many U.S. states. It has happened many times that our government claims that we need to respond with military force because our military personnel or simply infrastructure in another country was allegedly attacked. In some cases, we find out much later that no such attack ever occurred. Sometimes it was not military personnel at all but some corporate contractor that was attacked. If any attack actually occurred, because we have heard false reports regarding that as well. But if none of our people were over there, they wouldn't be attacked. If they were here, they wouldn't be attacked, would they? All right, so in addition to all the above, the U.S. government may contract with private security companies to operate in other countries, meaning mercenaries. They are mercenaries, and there is no other appropriate name for them. So what is my proposal on this? First of all, I would combine all of the agencies and functions I have mentioned into one comprehensive budget. Doing this would give Americans a much more clear and comprehensive view of exactly how much we actually spend on what we call defense. Just upgrading nuclear weapons, as I was saying, comes at a cost of $100 billion a year or more. Where do I get this number from? From the fact that former President Barack Obama authorized $1 trillion over 10 years to upgrade the nuclear arsenal in 2016. So that comes out over 10 years to $100 billion a year. All right, so you know what happened to the Pentagon budget when he did that? Absolutely nothing. That alone tells you that the funding for this comes from elsewhere in the budget. So second, I would reduce our nuclear arsenal by 90%. Right this minute, the U.S. has an estimated 5,500 nuclear weapons. Keep in mind, modern nuclear weapons are hundreds to thousands of times more powerful than the weapons that were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Those were nuclear weapons. Thermonuclear weapons were developed after that. So, where was I at? So, all right, there is absolutely no reason to have that many nuclear weapons for defensive purposes. Nuclear weapons have no defensive application. Nuclear weapons are offensive weapons by their very nature. The only way in which they are defensive is in that they deter other countries with nuclear weapons from launching a nuclear attack. I would say 550 nuclear weapons would serve that purpose, wouldn't you? By the way, I would also announce a no first strike policy. Nuclear weapons should only be used as a response, not as an aggressive attack method. Next, I would reduce our number of foreign military bases by at least 80%, if not 100%. Close them all and bring our personnel back home. If I kept any foreign bases open, they would be converted to a mission of humanitarian assistance and diplomatic engagement. Personnel would be trained for that purpose more than for military aggression. They would have a mission dedicated to saving and preserving lives above that of cutting lives short. None of this means we would abandon our allies if we were needed. Consider this. With modern technology and transportation, advanced U.S. forces can be anywhere in the world within hours. Major forces within days. So what is the advantage to having U.S. forces in 800 bases around the globe? Honestly, I don't see any advantage at all. All this does is drive up what is referred to as defense spending, most of which does nothing but benefit military contractors as we wear out equipment on training maneuvers. Third, I would outlaw all government or corporate spending for private militias and security firms in other countries. In other words, mercenaries, who are not governed by international or domestic laws. The expenses for these things wind up being paid for by reducing support for domestic social programs. Buy more bombs while Americans get evicted from homes and line up for food banks, then the food banks run out of food. None of our defense spending makes us more secure. It is not a question that our attacks on other countries only creates more animosity. If you lived in a foreign country and had no hatred for the U.S., just going about living your life, then your child gets killed by a U.S. drone strike, what would your reaction be? That drone strike just created at least one more terrorist. We drop at least 120 bombs a day. So we create at least 120 terrorists a day, every day. This is something we have been doing for decades at this point. In 2020, I was extremely critical of our national security, and I still am. Millions were lined up for food banks. Meanwhile, crops were rotting in fields and warehouses by hundreds of thousands of tons. Feed animals were slaughtered and buried by the millions. Our military could have been transporting food to food banks, processing locations, warehouses, and grocery stores. The military did not do that. So, in what way did our military add to your security? What did they add to the national security? Nothing. I would not allow regime change wars to happen at all. The United States does not have the right to determine the form of government of another country or who heads other governments. I would order that the CIA cease all propaganda efforts intended to undermine the governments of other countries. This would include ceasing all funding for non-governmental organizations, NGOs, such as the National Endowment for Democracy, NED, which has nothing to do with democracy. Or, very simply, change the mission statement of the CIA to be collection of intelligence with no right to engage in propaganda at all. That means the CIA would be disarmed. The CIA should not be armed at all above the individual level. They are supposed to be an intelligence gathering agency, not a militia. So their funding would be drastically reduced until they can prove without question that they have the capacity to reduce tensions with other countries rather than inciting conflicts, which reduces our security and makes it necessary for us to spend more on defense. Above all else, I would engage in diplomacy so that we reduce the need for outrageous military spending. This means I would hold dialogue with our adversaries on a fair and equal basis. I would expand the number of diplomats under the State Department. Lastly, I would sign the United States on to the International Criminal Court system. War crimes should be prosecuted, including when they are committed by our military or leaders of government. This would enable greater diplomatic engagement, as other governments would know that we hold our own people accountable at all levels. This would reduce the need for more weapons and armaments. No, I think I left something out. I would close Guantanamo within the first 100 days. Period. That's it. It closed. Gone. All right. One idea I would have to look at more deeply into the legality of is the thought of nationalizing the entire defense industry. This would eliminate much of the profit motive for armed conflict. Plus, it would mean each dollar spent on arms and defense technology would deliver more of these things, rather than your tax dollars being paid directly into dividend payouts for stockholders. Even if that is not possible, I would make it illegal for defense contractors to advertise. You pay for those advertisements. I would also make it difficult or impossible for defense contractors to donate to political campaigns. Once again, your taxes pay for those so-called donations. So these are a few ideas I have about reducing military spending. Tell me what you think. You can see that absolutely none of this reduces our security, and in most cases, these ideas strengthen our security. To continue escalating defense spending or even maintain the current level is unsustainable. It has been unsustainable for quite a few years. We pay for it on many levels which politicians and the media will never mention. All right, so be sure and subscribe to the page where you are watching or reading this. Share this article or video and talk about these subjects. If you can, then please donate $1 a month or whatever you can afford to help expand the campaign. And thank you for watching. I hope you have a good day.